miserable little thing. You will never belong in this family, and that child of yours will bring nothing but shame." My mother-in-law hurled those words at me as she struck me in the stomach right in front of all her guests. I pushed myself up from the floor, steadied my breath, and reached into the pocket of my dress. Without a word, I handed her an envelope. She opened it, and the color drained from her face so fast it looked unreal. A second later, she collapsed where she stood. But to understand how things reached this moment, we have to go back to 3 years earlier, when my life looked completely different. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new real-life experiences every day. If you enjoy stories with unexpected twists, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Now, let's return to the beginning. I promise you'll want to hear this until the end. My name is Naomi. I'm 32, and I work as an accountant for a construction company in Atlanta. My life has always been simple and grounded. My parents were college professors. My dad, Stanley, taught advanced math, and my mom, Gail, taught philosophy. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom condo in Decatur. Books mattered more than material things, and our dinners were filled with discussions about literature, science, and ideas. I never dreamed of luxury. I only dreamed of meeting someone genuine, someone I could connect with, someone I could build a strong life with. And then I met him. Eli, as I call him, stepped into my life unexpectedly. We met at a contemporary art exhibition. I was there with a friend, and he was explaining color theory to someone with so much passion that I couldn't help but listen. After the exhibition, we ended up talking for hours in a nearby cafe. Eli was an architect at a major design firm downtown, smart, well-read, funny, and endlessly curious. We dated for almost a year before he ever spoke seriously about his mother. Until then, he'd only mentioned her briefly, and every time he did, there was tension in his voice. "My mom. She's complicated," he said one evening as we walked along the Beltline. "She has very strict ideas about how life should look and who should be part of it." I didn't think too deeply about it at the time. I assumed she was simply a demanding parent with high standards. How wrong I was. The first time I met her was at her home, or rather, her mansion, a massive 2-story estate in a gated Buckhead community, complete with pristine gardens and a fountain. I had no idea Eli's family was that wealthy. Vivian Dubois greeted us in a living room that looked more like a museum. Crystal chandeliers, antique sofas, gold-framed paintings, nothing felt lived in. She was tall, elegant, perfectly styled, and her gray eyes had a chill that could freeze a room. "So this is Naomi," she said, examining me like merchandise. Her voice was polite, but there was something sharp beneath it. I reached out to shake her hand, but she barely touched my fingers before pulling away. During dinner, she kept the conversation civil, but every question felt like an evaluation. Where did I study? A state university. What did my parents do? Professors. Where did we live? A modest condo. With each answer, her lips tightened. When Eli stepped out to take a call, she leaned toward me. "You must understand, Naomi," she said quietly. "My son could have chosen anyone. He has a remarkable education, a strong career, and comes from a respected family. I always imagined he would be with someone from the right circle." My stomach tightened, but I stayed calm. "Mrs. Dubois, I love your son, and I hope we can find common ground." She smiled in a way that wasn't a smile. "We'll see. Love is sweet, but marriage requires far more, especially when my son is involved." Eli apologized the entire drive home. He said his mother just needed time, that she had strong opinions but meant well. I wanted to believe him, but she never warmed up, not even a little. Every meeting became a test. She constantly compared me to Chanel Ellington, the daughter of her wealthy friend who owned a chain of luxury boutiques. Chanel was everything she considered ideal: rich background, European degree, flawless appearance. "You know, Eli, Chanel just returned from Paris," she would say loudly at family dinners, as if I wasn't there. "She's so polished now, and she's still single. With her background, can you imagine?" Eli would stiffen each time, but his mother never stopped. Whenever Chanel appeared at the same event as us, Vivian would practically orchestrate a performance introducing us while listing Chanel's accomplishments and all the things she believed I lacked. "Naomi is an accountant," she would say, in a tone that almost sounded apologetic, "and Chanel manages international purchasing for her mother's corporation." Such vision, such valuable connections. Chanel herself would give me a tight, uncomfortable smile. She wasn't a bad person, just someone who talked only about fashion, resorts, and high-profile events. Beautiful, yes, but shallow. But to Vivian, none of that mattered. Status mattered. Money mattered. Connections mattered. She owned 11 luxury beauty salons across the city, each in prime locations. She was well known in Atlanta society, served on charity boards, and frequently appeared in elite magazines. And in her eyes, I simply didn't fit. 18 months into our relationship, Eli proposed. We were sitting on the rooftop of his office building, watching the sun melt into the skyline, when he pulled out a small velvet box. "Naomi, I want to spend my life with you. You're genuine, thoughtful, and you make me feel like I can breathe. Will you marry me?" I didn't hesitate. I said yes without a flicker of doubt. I loved this man, and I believed the two of us could face anything together. When we told his mother, Vivienne Dubois, her face twisted for a second before she forced it back into a polite expression. "Well, congratulations," she said, her tone icy. "Elijah, I need a word with you. Alone." They stayed in her study for almost an hour. Even through the door, I could hear raised voices. When Eli finally emerged, he looked exhausted. "Mom thinks we're moving too fast," he muttered. "And what did you tell her?" "That I love you, and we are getting married." But from that moment on, the wedding turned into a disaster, one she carefully orchestrated. We wanted a small, intimate celebration. She insisted it had to be a grand production. We chose a cozy venue for the reception. She booked the fanciest restaurant in town, then canceled the reservation the day before, forcing us to scramble. We picked a photographer. She hired her own, and the final photos looked as if I barely existed in half of them. On the day of the wedding, she arrived wearing a black dress. She sat through the entire event with a frozen expression, offered no toast, no warmth, not even a polite blessing. When guests asked if she was doing all right, she would sigh dramatically and say, "I'm simply concerned about my son's future." After the wedding, Eli and I lived in my tiny one-bedroom apartment. He wanted to rent something bigger, but I insisted we save for a down payment and build stability first. We both worked, planned, and tried to create a foundation for our future. Vivian called our apartment a shoebox. She would show up unannounced, critique everything, the walls, the furniture, the dishes. Once I found her in our bedroom, rifling through my closet. "I just wanted to see what conditions my son is living in," she said calmly, as if that excused the invasion. Then I got pregnant. Eli and I were thrilled. He became even more attentive, bringing me breakfast in bed, going with me to every appointment, reading every parenting book he could find. I naively thought this news might soften his mother. After all, this was her grandchild. But when we told her, she looked at me with such disdain that I felt a chill run through me. "A baby," she repeated slowly. "In that apartment? On your salaries?" "Mom, we'll manage," Eli said. "Plenty of families raise kids in smaller homes." "Plenty of families," she echoed, as if it were an insult. "My grandchild will not live like that. Although with a mother like that, I suppose it's inevitable." My anger tightened in my chest, but I held it back. Eli placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Mom, please don't say things like that." "I'm simply being honest," she replied. "If you had married Chanel, you'd already have a custom home, a secure future, everything. Instead, you're barely staying afloat." With each month of my pregnancy, things grew worse. Vivian seemed determined to jab deeper each time. She would buy us baby items and say loudly in front of others, "These aren't the brands I dreamed of for my grandchild, but one must adjust to the parents' level." She invited us to dinners with her high society friends and used every opportunity to belittle me. "Naomi is a simple girl," she'd say with a sweet smile that never touched her eyes. She's never even been to Europe. Can you imagine? Elijah took her to the Caribbean once, an all-inclusive resort, and she thought that was global travel. Eli tried to defend me, but she was a master at twisting the narrative. She would clutch her chest, claim she was overwhelmed, and dramatically take a pill always in front of Eli. He would waver, apologize, and beg me to give her time. She's my mother, Nay. She just struggles to let go. Please be patient. But time passed, and nothing changed. If anything, she grew even more hostile as my due date approached. Then, in my 6th month, everything shifted. Vivian had forgotten her phone at our apartment after one of her visits. When the screen lit up with a new message, I glanced at it without thinking, then froze. It was a conversation with Chanel Ellington. Vivian: Chanel, darling, don't worry. I'm sure this marriage won't last. Eli will realize his mistake soon. Be ready. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and sat down, staring out the window for a long time. My mother-in-law wasn't just refusing to accept me, she was actively working to break up our marriage. That night I made a decision. I would not explode. I would not argue. I would be strategic. A week later, during a visit to her mansion, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I passed her home office, I noticed the door was slightly open. That alone caught my attention. She always kept it locked. I wasn't planning anything, but something made me pause. On the desk lay an open folder. I recognized the name of one of her salons and columns of numbers. The accountant in me instinctively read the figures, and my heart began to pound. The internal records didn't match the official reports. The revenue numbers were far too low. I had seen this pattern before. I knew exactly what it was, and in that moment, I realized I was holding something far more powerful than any insult she had ever thrown at me. What I discovered in that folder was underground bookkeeping completely off the record. My pulse hammered in my ears. Still, I quietly pulled out my phone and photographed several pages before carefully placing everything back and slipping out of the office unnoticed. For the next week, I buried myself in financial law. I contacted an attorney who specialized in tax regulations, a longtime colleague of my father, and showed him the photos. His conclusion was absolute. If the documents were real, then Vivian Dubois was involved in serious tax fraud. Not just a fine, but real legal consequences. The kind that could destroy her empire. From that moment on, I collected information methodically, page by page, number by number. Vivian lived with such confidence in her untouchable status that she didn't even bother hiding her trail. She believed her connections made her safe. And maybe they did, until now. She had nothing on me, but I had everything on her. I didn't tell Eli. He adored his mother despite her cruelty toward me. Knowing the truth would have shattered him, and I wasn't ready to break his heart. But I promised myself, if she humiliated me one more time, I would use everything I'd gathered. 2 months later now, 7 months pregnant, Vivian invited us to a large charity event at her mansion. She insisted important people would be there and that the entire family had to attend. I didn't want to go. I was exhausted, swollen, and barely fitting into any of my clothes. But Eli begged. Please, Nay. Mom is trying to make peace. He still believed she could change. The mansion was overflowing with guests, business owners, public figures, the city's most polished elite. Vivian was glowing with pride, accepting compliments and showcasing her success. I sat in the corner in a simple black maternity dress, feeling awkward beside women wearing sparkling evening gowns and jewelry worth more than my yearly salary. About an hour later, Vivian approached me with 3 of her closest friends, Cynthia Price, Margaret Olson, and Brenda Wells. All of them looked me over the way someone might examine a budget item. Naomi, sweetheart, Vivian said in a syrupy voice. I had learned long ago that sweetness from her meant something unpleasant was coming. Meet my dear friends. I stood, offering my hand. None of them shook it. Vivian has told us so much about you, one woman drawled, inspecting me from head to toe. She mentioned you come from a very modest background. My parents are professors, I replied evenly. Oh, how noble, another murmured with exaggerated admiration. Such a sweet choice, even if not particularly rewarding. Vivian watched me with satisfied amusement. Naomi works as an accountant, she said casually. At some construction firm, Eli could provide for the household entirely, but Naomi insists on working, so very independent. The sarcasm was so obvious that several nearby guests paused to listen. I think it's important for a woman to have her own income, I said. No one should rely completely on their spouse. Of course, Vivian said, waving her hand dismissively. Still, ladies, I always imagined Eli with someone from our circle. I had the perfect match in mind. Chanel, Cynthia's daughter. They looked wonderful together at that fundraiser 3 years ago, didn't they? Oh, yes, Cynthia chimed in. Chanel is still unmarried, such a beautiful girl with so many opportunities. Hard to imagine why she's alone. Every word stung like a needle to my chest, but I stayed quiet. My hands clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. But what can one do? Vivian sighed theatrically. Youth, emotions, and Eli didn't listen to reason. Now they're in a tiny apartment, counting every penny and expecting a baby. I just hope the child is healthy. Though, given the background, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Something inside me snapped. Mrs. Dubois? I said quietly, steadily. You've made it clear from the start that you think I'm unworthy of your son, but do not speak about my child that way. Speak about your child? She widened her eyes with fake innocence. I am simply concerned. Children inherit many things. Looks, capabilities, even status. It's natural to worry. The room fell silent. Conversations faded. People turned to watch us. Eli was across the room, but the shift in atmosphere drew his attention. He hurried toward us. Mom, what's going on? He asked, seeing my pale face. I'm explaining reality, Vivian said calmly. A child raised in limited conditions by a mother from an unimpressive background is unlikely to accomplish much. It's statistics. Mom, stop. Eli's voice rose, and even more people turned toward us. But Vivian couldn't stop. Years of suppressed contempt poured out of her like a storm breaking loose. You married below yourself, Elijah. She and her little family clung to you for money, for status, for the advantages you can give them. And now she's giving you a child that will turn out exactly like her? The room froze. Everyone stared. My hands trembled. My throat tightened from the sting of humiliation and fury. Vivian stepped closer, her face twisted with malice. You miserable thing, she hissed. You will never belong in this family, and that child of yours will be— Her hand whipped forward. She struck me in the stomach. A sharp, tearing pain exploded through me. I doubled over, clutching my belly, and collapsed to the floor. A chorus of gasps filled the room. Someone screamed, and in that moment, everything changed. Eli rushed toward me, but I was already forcing myself upright, holding onto the edge of a nearby table for balance. Slowly, painfully, slowly, I straightened. My breath shook, but my mind was clear. Vivian stood a few feet away, her face twisted in rage, breathing heavily. I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out the envelope I had carried with me for 2 weeks, waiting for the exact moment she crossed the final line. I extended it toward her. This is for you, I said, my voice steady and cold. I think you'll find the contents enlightening. She snatched the envelope, tore it open, and scanned the documents inside. I watched the transformation on her face, how the color drained, how her eyes widened, how her hands began to tremble as she read. Inside were copies of the IRS notice announcing a major audit of her salons, copies of the official complaint filed with federal authorities, evidence of financial misconduct totaling more than $2.5 million, and the photos I had taken from her office proof of the double books she thought were hidden. Vivian looked up at me, her expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and pure terror. You, How dare you?" But she never finished. She swayed, the papers slipped from her fingers, and she collapsed to the floor. Guests screamed. Panic broke out. Someone yelled for medical help. Her friends rushed to her, frantically fanning her face and trying to lift her head. Eli stared at me, confusion and fear in his eyes, but I stood completely still, one hand resting over my stomach, right where his mother had struck me, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt control shift back to me. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They revived her, checked her vitals, and helped her sit up. The moment Vivian opened her eyes, she searched the room until she found me. The hatred in her stare was ice cold. You, she rasped, trying to lunge forward. The paramedics held her back, urging her to stay calm. Guests began to leave quietly, whispering among themselves. The charity gala of the year had turned into a scandal that would be on every socialite's lips by morning. Eli took my hand. "We need to go. Right now." We left the mansion under the stunned eyes of those still inside. In the car, silence wrapped around us like smoke. Eli gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Finally he asked, "Nay, what was that? What did you give her?" I inhaled deeply. I'd known this moment would come. "Your mother keeps 2 sets of financial records for her salons," I said. "She's been avoiding taxes. I found the documents 2 months ago. I gathered evidence and filed the complaint." Eli slammed on the brakes. He pulled over, turned off the engine, and stared at me as if he didn't recognize me. "What have you done?" His voice shook. "That's my mother. How could you? How could I?" My voice rose with emotion I couldn't contain anymore. "Eli, your mother just struck me. I'm 7 months pregnant. She insulted our baby, your baby, in front of everyone, and you're asking how I could report a crime?" "Nay, that's serious," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "because she committed something serious. She broke the law for years. I just provided the evidence. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability and protection." My voice trembled, but I kept going. "I tolerated her cruelty for 3 years. I stayed silent when she compared me to other women, when she sabotaged our wedding, when she mocked our home. I swallowed every insult for the sake of our marriage. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. But the moment she laid her hands on me, on our child, everything changed." Eli stared through the windshield, his jaw tight. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "And what would you have done?" I asked. "Begged me not to hurt her feelings? Asked me for more patience? Eli, you've been giving her chances your entire life. Look at how she treats people." He turned sharply toward me. "She is my mother." "And I am your wife," I said, placing my hand on my belly. "And this is our child. Who do you stand with, Eli? The woman who just hurt your pregnant wife or your family?" The silence that followed felt endless. I watched him wrestle with a choice he never wanted to face. Finally, he exhaled shakily. "Let's go home." We drove the rest of the way without speaking. At home, Eli went straight to the shower. I sat on the couch, hands trembling, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. My phone buzzed non-stop, over 20 missed calls, all from Vivian and her relatives. I muted it. When Eli returned, he sat beside me quietly. I need time," he said finally. "It's too much. I didn't think tonight would turn out like this." "I understand," I said softly, "but I don't regret my choice. And if I had to do it again, I would. Protecting my child, my family, that's the right thing." That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed. I barely slept. I kept replaying everything, the strike, the envelope, the collapse, the look on Eli's face. I rested my hand on my stomach and felt our baby move. "Everything will be all right," I whispered. "I will protect you from anyone." The next morning my phone rang. It was my mother. Someone who attended the gala recognized me and had already shared the story. "Naomi, what happened?" my mother asked, her voice tight with worry. I told her everything. She listened quietly, occasionally gasping. "My girl, she said afterward. You did the right thing. No one has the right to raise a hand to a pregnant woman, and the fact that you reported her wrongdoing, that's not revenge. That's doing what's right. My father came on the line. You showed strength, Naomi, real strength. Not everyone can stand up for themselves the way you did. Their words steadied me. 3 days later, the police arrived. 2 investigators arrived at the mansion, accompanied by official witnesses. They presented a warrant to search Vivian Dubois' Buckhead estate. Eli was at work and I didn't call him. I knew he was already hurting enough. The investigators were polite but meticulous. They collected her computer, boxes of files, flash drives, and even handwritten notebooks. Everything was recorded on video. Vivian sat on the living room sofa, pale, shaking, looking as if she had aged a decade in a single afternoon. When the investigators left, she immediately called Eli. He put her on speaker. Elijah, my son, I need your help, she said in a voice I had never heard from her, fragile, pleading. Your wife set me up. This is all false, a trap. I need a good attorney. I need money. Mom, I can't, Eli replied. How can you say that? I'm your mother. I raised you. I gave you everything. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, you hurt my pregnant wife. You insulted her publicly, and you really did break the law. This is the result of your choices. Elijah, she cried, her voice rising into panic. You're choosing that girl over your own mother? I'm choosing my family, he replied quietly. Please, don't call me again. He ended the call. His hands trembled. His jaw was tight with pain. I walked over and wrapped my arms around him. Eli held me close and whispered, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. I'm sorry I was weak. You're not weak, I said gently. You love your mother. That's natural. But sometimes real love means letting someone face the consequences of their own actions. The next few weeks were tense and exhausting. Eli's extended relatives flooded us with calls, demanding I withdraw the report, claiming I had ruined the family. They called me a traitor, a destroyer, a homewrecker. His Aunt Carol was the worst. She drove to our apartment, banged on the door, and shouted through it, Come out! You ruined your mother-in-law's life. How do you even sleep at night? I didn't open the door. I called the police and filed a harassment report. After that, Carol didn't return, but the online harassment began instead. Someone in the family posted my picture online with the caption, This woman turned her mother-in-law over to the authorities. Comments flooded in, some supportive, many accusing me of being cold, calculated, or cruel. Eli shut down all his social media. I set mine to private. We hid from the noise and clung to our small corner of peace. I saw my doctor regularly. After the hit to my abdomen, I lived in fear that something was wrong, but every appointment brought reassurance. The baby is fine, Naomi. Strong heartbeat, good development. You need restless stress if possible. Less stress was almost laughable. I was the primary witness in an investigation involving my own mother-in-law. A month after the search, Vivian was called in for questioning. Her attorney sat beside her, but even he couldn't soften what the investigators had uncovered. Her wrongdoing was far larger than I ever imagined. She hadn't just understated revenue. She had paid employees off the books, failed to officially register staff, used shell companies to conceal assets, manipulated corporate records for years. The estimated financial impact exceeded $23 million. This was no longer a civil violation. It was a major criminal case long-term, organized, and extremely serious. Vivian was released under conditions. She couldn't leave the city until the investigation ended. Her accounts and assets were frozen. News spread across Atlanta like wildfire. She had been a prominent figure in the business community. Newspapers ran articles, TV channels covered the story, and online forums buzzed with speculation. Her former society friends, the same polished ladies she once impressed, quickly distanced themselves. We had no idea, they told reporters. She always seemed so proper. We're shocked. Hypocrisy at its finest. Vivian tried contacting Eli through her attorney. She sent messages asking to meet, to explain, to talk. Eli refused every time. He had made his choice, but it weighed heavily on him. Many nights, I found him awake in the kitchen, sitting with a cold cup of tea, staring out at nothing. One night at 3 a.m., I found him like that. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly, sitting beside him. "Thinking about Mom," he said quietly. "She wasn't always like this. When I was little, she was caring, warm. Dad died when I was 12. She was left alone, and she built that business from nothing. I think something inside her cracked after that. She became obsessed with control, money, status." "Eli, difficult circumstances don't excuse cruelty," I said gently. "Many people lose loved ones. Many face hardship. But they don't hurt others because of it. Your mother made choices. She chose to break the law. She chose to belittle people. She chose status over compassion." He nodded slowly, though I could see the conflict in his eyes. The investigation continued. I was called in several times as a witness. I described exactly how I discovered the documents, what I saw, and how I collected the evidence. The investigators were respectful and professional. Vivian Dubois' attorney tried to undermine my credibility, implying I acted out of personal resentment and that I had somehow trespassed into her office, violating her privacy. But my own lawyer dismantled those accusations effortlessly. "My client discovered the documents while lawfully present in her mother-in-law's home as family," he explained. "Upon realizing she had witnessed potential wrongdoing, she fulfilled her civic responsibility by reporting it. No unlawful behavior occurred. And gradually, my fear eased. I began to understand, truly understand, that I had done the right thing. The law was on my side, and more importantly, Eli was on my side. He changed over those months. He grew steadier, stronger, less concerned with appearances. When coworkers murmured about his mother's legal situation, he responded directly, without shame or excuses. 'My mother broke the law. She will face the consequences. I'm not going to hide it.' That honesty earned him real respect. Eventually, the whispers disappeared. By my 8th month, I went on maternity leave. The doctor said the birth would be on time. Everything looked good. Eli and I set up a cozy little corner for the baby in our small apartment. A crib, a stroller, tiny clothes. Nothing extravagant, but quality and full of love. My parents visited often, thrilled at the thought of meeting their granddaughter. During the final ultrasound, we learned we were having a girl. Eli chose the name Simone, and I agreed immediately. Bright, graceful a name filled with hope. A week before my due date, the prosecution summoned me. The case was ready for trial, and the lead prosecutor needed a few clarifications. Eli insisted on coming with me. He refused to let me go alone, not this late in the pregnancy. We were waiting in the hallway when I suddenly saw her. Vivian Dubois stepped out of an office with her attorney. I barely recognized her. Her hair had streaks of gray, her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken. Even her expensive suit hung loosely on her frame. She looked as if the past few months had drained the life from her. Our eyes met. The bitterness in her stare made me instinctively place a protective hand over my belly. "Elijah!" she called out, her voice cracked and trembling. Eli got to his feet. "Mom, my son, please, you have to help me. You have to convince her to withdraw the complaint. Please, I'll do anything." "Mom, it's too late," he said. "The case is already going to court." "But she can say she misinterpreted something. She can fix this," Vivian insisted. "Mom," Eli said quietly, "you kept 2 sets of books. That's a fact. The investigators have all the evidence." Vivian's eyes flared. She pushed past her lawyer and jabbed a finger toward me. "This is all her fault. That woman destroyed my life. I hope you regret ever being with her." Her lawyer grabbed her arm. "Ms. Dubois, please, this isn't helping your case." Eli moved in front of me, shielding me with his body. "Mom," he said, voice firm and unshakable. "Leave. Now." Even I was startled by the steel in his tone. Vivian flinched, then turned and hurried toward the exit. Her lawyer gave us an apologetic nod and followed her. I exhaled shakily. My hands were trembling. "It's all right." Eli said softly, wrapping his arm around me. She can't hurt you anymore. The questioning went smoothly. I confirmed everything, signed the necessary paperwork, and the prosecutor informed us the trial was scheduled for the next month. You will be needed as a witness, he explained, but given your condition, the court may allow you to testify remotely. I want to be there in person, I said, unless the baby arrives earlier. Eli squeezed my hand. 2 days later, labor began, early but strong. I woke in the night with sharp contractions. We called 911 and I was rushed to the hospital. Eli stayed beside me for every moment. He held my hand, wiped my forehead, whispered encouragement. The labor lasted nearly 8 hours, long and exhausting, but when our daughter's first cry echoed through the room, every moment of pain disappeared. A girl, the midwife announced. 7 pounds, 8 ounces, 20 inches, APGAR of 9. She's perfect. They laid the baby on my chest, a tiny face, soft dark hair, eyes squeezed shut. Simone, I whispered, our little sunshine. Eli kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my hands. Tears streamed down his face. Thank you, he whispered again and again. My parents soon arrived. My mother cried with joy. My father couldn't look away from his granddaughter. She looks just like you did as a baby, my mom said, studying Simone carefully. I thought about my mother-in-law's cruel words, that my child would be a disgrace. Instead, I held a perfectly healthy, beautiful little girl in my arms. No dark fate, only love. Eli chose not to tell his mother about the birth. I don't want her to know, he said, not until the trial is over. She'll use it to manipulate me, and we don't need that right now. I agreed. A month after Simone's birth, the trial began. Since I was breastfeeding, I brought the baby with me. My mother stayed with Simone in the hallway while I testified. The courtroom was full. Journalists had filled several rows. Vivian's relatives sat front and center, glaring at me. I stood tall and didn't look away. Vivian sat at the defense table with her lawyer, wearing a severe dark suit. Her hair was pulled tightly back. She tried to maintain some sense of dignity, but I saw her hands trembling. The judge read the charges, an extensive list of major felonies, including large-scale tax violations, improper business practices, and document falsification. Each charge against Vivian carried a maximum penalty of up to 6 years in federal prison. The witness testimony began soon after. Former employees from her salons were the first to take the stand. They described receiving part of their wages in unrecorded cash envelopes, being instructed to stay silent during inspections, and how the actual income of the salons was nearly triple the amount officially documented. Then the IRS investigator testified. He broke down the scheme step by step, presented documents, charts, and comparisons, a clear picture of long-term financial misconduct. Then it was my turn. I stood, walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. After taking my seat, the prosecutor began with direct, concise questions. I explained everything: how I discovered the documents, what I saw, how I sought legal advice, and how I gathered additional evidence. The prosecutor's final question was, "Tell us, witness, what motivated you to report this to the authorities?" I looked directly at Vivian. "I was protecting my family," I said. "The defendant repeatedly humiliated me, tried to damage my marriage, and eventually struck me in the abdomen while I was 7 months pregnant. In that moment, I realized I could no longer remain silent. I used the only lawful tool available to me." Vivian's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection. The witness is attempting to justify her actions as personal retaliation." "Overruled," the judge replied calmly. "The witness's motivation is not relevant to the evidence of the crime. Proceed." The defense attorney began his cross-examination, trying to catch me in inconsistencies, but I had prepared for this moment. I answered every question clearly and without emotion. "You entered the defendant's private office without permission." "I was in my mother-in-law's home as family, at her invitation. The office door was open. I saw documents lying on the desk." "You photographed private papers." "I photographed evidence of a potential crime. Under our laws, every citizen has a duty to report such evidence." The lawyer tried a different angle, then another, but none of it worked. After a few minutes, the judge dismissed me. I returned to the hallway, where Simone slept peacefully in her stroller. My mother sat beside her, humming softly. I picked up my daughter and held her close. She was my strength, my reminder of why I had stood up and fought. The trial lasted 3 full days. More experts, accountants, and witnesses testified. The picture that formed was overwhelming. Vivian had been manipulating her business accounts for years, diverting millions that should have gone toward schools, public services, and infrastructure. Finally, the defendant herself took the stand. She lifted her chin and said, "I admit I made mistakes in managing my business." Her voice was steady, though laced with bitterness. "But I will never forgive the person who ruined my life out of spite. That woman," she gestured toward me, "entered my family, deceived my son, and destroyed everything I built. She pretends to be a savior, but I know the truth. She is a cold, calculating—" The judge struck the gavel sharply. "Defendant, stay on topic. Your personal disputes have no relevance to this case." Vivian fell silent and sat down. The judge retreated to deliberate. We waited almost 2 hours. The courtroom was suffocatingly quiet. Finally, the verdict was read. The defendant is found guilty of felony tax evasion. Sentenced to 4 years in a federal minimum security facility. Ordered to pay restitution of $23 million, and all assets remain frozen until the debt is paid in full. Vivian's face lost all remaining color. Her relatives erupted, shouting at the judge and at me. Security called for order as chaos swelled. Vivian's lawyer tried to speak to her, but she stared ahead in shock, as if unable to process reality. I rose and headed toward the exit. Eli wrapped his arm around me. My mother pushed Simone's stroller. We left the courthouse under flashing cameras and a barrage of questions. "Naomi, are you satisfied with the verdict? Do you plan to reconnect with your mother-in-law after her release? Do you regret your actions?" I turned briefly toward the cameras. "Justice was served," I said. "I regret nothing." Then we walked away without looking back. 6 months passed after the trial. Vivian was serving her sentence somewhere in the state. Eli and I tried to move forward, focusing on our life and our daughter. Simone was extraordinary calm, bright, endlessly curious. At 5 months, she rolled over for the first time. At 6, she sat with support. The pediatrician said she was developing beautifully. Every time I saw her rosy cheeks and sparkling eyes, I remembered Vivian's cruel words and smiled. No curse could touch our little girl. Eli and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours free from toxicity. One room became the nursery, the other our bedroom. The kitchen was small, the bathroom simple, but the peace was priceless. I began working remotely, handling accounting tasks from home while caring for Simone. Eli received a promotion at his design firm and now led his own department. His salary improved, but we continued living modestly, saving carefully. "We're getting closer to that down payment," Eli would say as we browsed listings. "Maybe another year." My parents helped constantly. Mom visited several times a week to watch Simone. Dad brought groceries, fixed small things around the apartment, and played with his granddaughter. Their support kept us standing. We avoided mentioning Vivian, but her presence sometimes resurfaced, especially through Aunt Carol, Vivian's sister, who continued to call Eli insistently. "Eli, she's your mother. How can you leave her alone in a place like that?" she demanded. "Aunt Carol," Eli replied calmly, "my mother made her choices. I'm not obligated to shield her from the consequences." "But she's suffering." "She lost everything. Everything she gained dishonestly," Eli told Aunt Carol during one of her relentless calls. "And she nearly harmed my pregnant wife. I'm sorry, but I've made my choice." After each argument with his relatives, Eli would grow quiet for the rest of the evening. I saw how conflicted he was, torn between loyalty and reality, but he stood firm, and I was proud of him. Vivian Dubois' entire estate was eventually sold at auction. Her mansion was purchased by a pair of young entrepreneurs. Her luxury cars went to collectors. Her antiques, artwork, expensive decor, all gone. Every cent was used to repay her debts to the government. Her salons were sold to another company, rebranded, redesigned, stripped of her legacy. Within months, there was nothing left of the empire she once bragged about. Simone turned 1. We held a small celebration in our apartment with only the people who mattered. My parents, 2 of Eli's closest friends, their spouses, and my childhood best friend. We baked a simple homemade cake, blew up balloons, and bought developmental toys. Simone laughed, clapped her hands, and tried to blow out her candle. "She's grown into such a beauty," my mother said, kissing her head. "Our smart girl," Eli whispered, slipping his arm around my shoulders. "We did it." "We did," I agreed. But deep inside, I knew our story with Vivian wasn't quite finished. She still had 3.5 years left on her sentence. What would happen when she got out? Would she try to force her way back into our lives? The answer came far sooner than I expected. 18 months after the trial, Simone was now 1.5 years, Aunt Carol called again. Her voice was urgent. "Eli, your mother is being released on parole. She needs a place to stay next week." Silence. Eli gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "And what are you suggesting?" "She can't go back to the house. It was sold. She has no money for rent. Eli, she's your mother. You have to take her in." "No." His voice was steady. "Absolutely not. How can you say that? Are you going to leave your own mother on the street?" "She can stay with other relatives," Eli said. "But not with us. That is final." Aunt Carol screamed at him through the phone until he hung up. I looked at him. "Are you sure? Completely sure?" He turned to me, then glanced at Simone happily playing with blocks on the carpet. "Yes," he said quietly but firmly. "I won't let her near our daughter. I won't expose Simone to that behavior. My mother never apologized. She never took responsibility. She still sees herself as the victim. People like that don't change." For a week we waited, tense, expecting a confrontation. None came. Until the day it did. Simone and I were walking through a nearby park on a warm autumn afternoon. Golden leaves fluttered around us. Simone toddled along the path, collecting acorns, giggling. I walked beside her, holding her tiny hand. And then I saw her, Vivian Dubois, sitting alone on a bench. She looked nothing like the woman I once knew, nothing like the powerful, polished socialite who commanded rooms. Her posture was bent. She wore a cheap jacket and faded jeans. Her hair was short and gray. Deep lines carved her face. Age, loss, and bitterness had reshaped her. Our eyes met. She rose from the bench slowly, almost painfully, and took a small step forward. "Naomi." I stopped immediately, pulling Simone closer to me. My daughter sensed the tension and pressed her face into my skirt. Vivian's gaze drifted to Simone, hungry, desperate, filled with longing. "Is that my granddaughter?" "No," I said calmly. "She is my daughter." "Eli won't answer my calls," she said, her voice trembling. "I tried coming to your apartment, but the doorman refused to let me in." "He did the right thing." Vivian took another step. "Please, please, I just want to see her. She's my blood." "You lost that right," I said, my voice low but steady. "The moment you struck me while I was pregnant and cursed my child." Vivian's face twisted. "I was angry. I wasn't thinking." "You were thinking," I answered. "You always think carefully. You intended to hurt me, and you did, and now you're facing the consequences." "Consequences?" Her voice rose sharply. "Is it justice that I lost everything? My home, my reputation, that I spent 1 year in a place for offenders? Is that justice?" "You broke the law," I said quietly. "For years." "Because of you!" she burst out, loud enough that passers-by turned their heads. "If it weren't for you, Eli would have married a proper girl. He would have had a good life." Simone began to cry. I picked her up and cradled her against my shoulder. "Vivian," I said firmly, "walk away, now. Or what? You'll go to the authorities again? You'll ruin what's left of my life." "I will do whatever I must to protect my daughter," I replied. "If you don't turn around right now, I am calling the police." She stared at me, a long, piercing look filled with resentment and despair. Then she spun around abruptly and walked away, her steps slow and dragging. I held Simone close, my hands trembling. This was not a victory. It was simply a boundary, a necessary one. That evening, I told Eli everything. He turned pale. "She's looking for us. This is serious. What do you want to do?" He was silent for a long time before saying, "I need to meet her, one final time, to end this once and for all." 3 days later, the meeting was set in a neutral cafe downtown. We left Simone with my parents. Vivian was already there when we arrived, sitting at a table with a cold cup of coffee untouched before her. When she saw Eli, something flickered in her eyes, hope, desperation, or both. "Elijah, my son." We sat down opposite her. Eli was tense, his fists clenched beneath the table. "Mom," he said, "we are here to talk for the last time." "The last time?" Her voice cracked. "Elijah, I'm your mother. You can't just erase me." "You erased yourself," Eli said, "when you hurt my wife, when you humiliated her for years, when you broke the law." "I made mistakes," she whispered, reaching her hand across the table toward him. He pulled his hand back. "I was blind," she said. "I didn't want to lose you. You are my only son my whole life, and when you chose her, I chose love," Eli said firmly. "I chose honesty. I chose someone who doesn't manipulate or deceive, someone who doesn't use people." Vivian's gaze shifted to me. She stared. "You turned him against me," Vivian said through clenched teeth. "No," I replied calmly. "You pushed him away with your own choices." Her voice shifted to a pitiful whisper. "I have nowhere to live, no money. Everything was taken. I'm staying with Carol, in her tiny apartment, sleeping on a cot. Eli, help me. You're my son." "I will help," Eli said in a steady voice. "I'll send you money to cover rent for a while, but do not expect to be part of our lives." "But my granddaughter," she pleaded. "I want to see my granddaughter. She's my blood." "No," Eli said. "Simone will not meet you. I won't expose her to the behavior you showed her mother. I won't allow you to fill her childhood with manipulation and bitterness." Vivian went pale. You're taking my granddaughter away from me." "No," Eli said quietly. "You took yourself away from her the moment you struck my pregnant wife and wished terrible things on our child. I remember those words. I always will, and I won't forgive them." "I was angry," she whispered. "I wasn't in control." "Adults are responsible for their actions," Eli replied. "You were always in control. You controlled everything, especially me. But now for the first time the control is mine, and I choose my wife. I choose my daughter. You are part of the past." Vivian covered her face. Her shoulders shook, but I felt no sympathy. She wasn't grieving the pain she had caused. She was grieving the loss of power. "Mom," Eli said as he stood up, "I'll transfer $4,000. That will cover a few months of rent and expenses. After that, you're on your own. Rebuild your life, but without us. Goodbye." He took my hand. We walked toward the exit. "Elijah, son, please," she called after him. But Eli didn't look back. Outside, he pulled me into his arms. "It's over," he whispered. His voice sounded lighter than I'd ever heard it. "We're free," I said softly. He kissed the side of my head. "Thank you for being stronger than me. Thank you for protecting our family." A year later, Simone grew into a lively, joyful little person, talkative, curious, and full of light. She adored books, crayons, and dancing around the living room. We enrolled her in a small children's development program where she made friends and flourished socially. Eli received another promotion, now deputy director of the design bureau, and his salary increased significantly. We still lived modestly, saving carefully, but for the first time, we saw real progress. I returned to my office part-time. Simone went to preschool in the mornings, which helped her blossom even more. My parents were delighted by her growth. Dad taught her how to count to 10, and Mom read her bedtime stories. We spent weekends together, celebrating holidays as a strong, united family. We heard nothing from Vivian after that final meeting. Even Aunt Carol stopped calling. Sometimes I wondered how Vivian was doing, but the thought never lingered. No guilt, no regret. Just distance. 6 months after that. We finally saved enough for a down payment. The search began. Dozens of viewings. Some neighborhoods felt unsafe, some layouts awkward, some prices absurd. Then, we found it. A simple but lovely 2-bedroom condo in a new development on the outskirts of the city. Bright rooms, a park nearby, a school and preschool close by, perfect for a young family. We took out the mortgage. The interest rate was high but manageable. We signed the papers. And then, the keys were ours. Moving day felt like a dream. Bare walls, fresh paint smell, echoing rooms. But everything in that apartment was honest, earned, and free of old shadows. "Mom! This is our home!" Simone shouted, running through the empty rooms. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "Our home." Eli hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. We did it. We did. Renovations and new beginnings. We did the renovations ourselves, evenings after work, weekends, tired but excited. Painting walls, hanging wallpaper, assembling furniture. My parents helped too. Dad installed the crown molding, Mom sewed curtains. We bought practical furniture, not luxury brands. Comfort and function mattered most. 3 months later, it was ready. We hosted a small housewarming party, inviting neighbors, co-workers, and friends. A modest meal, homemade dishes, plenty of warmth. Eli raised his glass. "To our home and to our family, for going through everything and becoming stronger." We toasted. I looked at my husband, at my daughter, at the place we built with our own hands, and felt complete happiness. 2 more years. Simone turned 5. She started kindergarten prep, learning letters, counting, drawing. Her teachers praised her curiosity and quick learning. We continued paying down the mortgage. We weren't rich, but we were steady. Every year, we rented a small house by the ocean for 2 weeks. Simone adored the sea, endless sandcastles and shells. Eli became the director of his design bureau, a title he earned through talent and dedication, not through his mother's connections. I got promoted too, now leading a small department. We even started making extra payments on the mortgage. Life was peaceful. Then one day, as we walked through the park hand in hand with Simone, she tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Mom, why don't I have a grandma on Daddy's side? Maya at preschool has 2 grandmas." I glanced at Eli. We had known this question would one day come. "Daddy did have a mother," Eli said gently. "But she wasn't a kind person. She hurt your mom, and we decided it was safer if she wasn't part of our family." "Was she mean?" Simone asked quietly. "She made hurtful choices," Eli said, "and she didn't want to admit she was wrong." Simone thought for a moment, and then shrugged. "It's okay. I have Grandma Gail and Grandpa Stanley. They're nice." "Yes, sweetheart," I smiled. "They love you very much." "I love them too," she chimed, already running toward the swings, the question forgotten. Children know how to move forward quickly. Eli squeezed my hand. "Do you think we made the right decision, keeping her out of Simone's life?" "We didn't take a grandmother away from her," I said softly. "Your mother removed herself from that role by her own actions. We gave Simone a peaceful childhood, free from insults and chaos. That is what matters." Eli nodded, watching our daughter laugh, her hair flying in the golden sunset. The world felt still and harmonious. "You know," I said, "when I first met your mother, she treated me like I wasn't worth a glance. She told me I had no future, that our child would bring shame. But look at us now. We have our own home, good jobs, a wonderful daughter. We built a life we love. And she lost everything because she clung to status instead of kindness." Eli chuckled. "Karma." "Not karma," I said. "Consequences. She chose control and power. We chose honesty and love." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you. You're the strongest woman I know." "I'm not strong," I whispered. "I just refuse to let anyone turn me into a victim." That night, after Simone drifted off to sleep, Eli and I sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, sipping tea. We talked about dreams, plans, and everything we wanted for our daughter. "I want Simone to have a good education," Eli said. "Not necessarily fancy, just one that gives her choices." "She will. That's why we do everything we do," I replied. "And I want us to teach her what truly matters," he added. "That character, honesty, and dignity define a person, not money. We'll teach her by example." We sat quietly, watching the city lights flicker. After a moment, Eli whispered, "Sometimes I wonder, if you hadn't found those documents, if you hadn't filed the report, what would have happened to us?" "We would still be living in the shadow of your mother," I said. "Still arguing, still torn, and Simone would have grown up thinking chaos was normal." "Do you regret what you did?" he asked. "No," I said firmly. "I'm grateful. You were caught in that cycle your whole life. You were afraid of her. I was terrified too, but I was even more afraid of raising our daughter to believe that mistreatment is acceptable just because someone is family." Eli took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. "And you broke that cycle. You taught her strength." Years passed. Simone grew into a bright, confident teenager, thoughtful, curious, and aware of her own worth. She knew the importance of honesty. She knew how to stand up for herself. She understood healthy boundaries. One day she came home from school and asked, "Mom, what really happened with Dad's mother? Why don't we ever see her?" I took a deep breath. The moment had come. "Sit down, Sonny," I said gently. "I'll tell you." I didn't share everything. Some details were too heavy, but I told her the truth. That her grandmother had treated me unkindly, that she once hurt me while I was pregnant, that she broke the law and faced the consequences, and that her father chose to protect our family. Simone listened silently, then nodded. "I understand. You were protecting us. And that's the right thing." She never asked again. Eli smiled when I told him. We had raised a strong daughter, one who understood that love is not about enduring harm, that family does not excuse disrespect, and that dignity always matters more than blood ties. Many years later. Sometimes I remember that night, standing in the grandeur of my mother-in-law's ballroom, holding the envelope with proof of her crimes. I remember the shock on her face, her collapse, and even now, I feel no guilt, only certainty that I made the right choice. Eli and I sit on our balcony, sipping tea while Simone, now grown, walks with her friends below. We're just an ordinary family, not wealthy, not glamorous, but deeply happy. "You know," I say to my husband, "your mother wanted you to marry a wealthy girl from her circle, live in a mansion, gain status. But what did you end up with instead?" "Love," he answers without hesitation. "A home we built ourselves, a daughter who's happy and safe, a life without manipulation, and self-respect. Do I regret it? Not for a second." He kisses me, and I smile. We saved each other. We survived everything together. We built a life we're proud to show our daughter. Somewhere, in another city, Vivienne Dubois lives on, alone, without wealth, without influence, without family. She made her choices long ago, money over compassion, status over love, control over dignity, and we chose differently. Simone runs up to us, laughing, sharing a joke. Eli wraps his arms around both of us. The warmth of my family surrounds me. We won. Not fairy tale victory, but real justice, where harmful behavior has consequences and where integrity is rewarded. And honestly, I couldn't imagine a better ending. I'm truly glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you enjoyed it, let me know by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'd love to see how many of us are here. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always curious to know where my amazing listeners are tuning in from. And if you'd like to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. It helps me keep creating new stories every day.